Nando! Wake up! He's opening his eyes. Nando.
On October 13th, 1972, a Uruguayan rugby team is traveling from Montevideo to Santiago, Chile for a tournament. The plane hits turbulence. The pilots stray off course.
This is your captain speaking. Please fasten your seatbelts.
Among the team members on board is 22-year-old Nando Parado. Thirty-two of 45 passengers and crew survived the crash. One of the survivors is 18-year-old Carlitos Paez.
The first thing I noticed when I stepped out of the fuselage was the white scenery, surrounded by mountains. Then, the cold.
No one knows where the plane has crashed. They are surrounded by mountains with little food or drink. At 4,000 meters, the temperatures are below freezing. To survive, a group of young men will be forced to break the most sacred of human taboos. It is one of the most remarkable and terrifying survival stories of the 20th century. When the plane does not arrive in Santiago, the Chilean Air Force launches a search and rescue mission. Jorge Massa is the joint commander of the rescue operation.
Initially, an investigation into a crash should be based on a flight path. The search begins at the last known point and works backward from there.
The Chilean Air Force searches along the scheduled flight path, but finds nothing.
The first night was horrible. People screaming, people dying, the cold, very brutal cold. For many of us, it was the first time we had seen a dead person.
By the following day, 4 more people have died. Among the dead is co-pilot Dante Laguirara. There are now 28 passengers still alive. The immediate danger for the survivors is hypothermia, which can occur when the body is exposed to cold. As their body temperatures drop, blood vessels close to the surface of the skin constrict, reducing blood flow to the extremities. This preserves the body's core temperature, protecting the vital organs. Continued exposure reduces nerve and motor functions. Heart rate and breathing decreases. Slowly, the body shuts down. To stay alive, the survivors huddled together inside the plane's fuselage, sharing their body heat. At 4,000 meters, temperatures outside can drop as low as minus 40 degrees Celsius at night. Their only hope is to be rescued.
The older boys said, "Carlitos, don't worry, we'll be rescued soon." I believed what they told me.
Carlitos' father is the first family member to arrive at the rescue headquarters in Chile.
I come to speak with Commander Massa. My name is Carlos Páez Hilardo.
Ok, pongo atento, porque yo sabía que de ninguna manera aquel Carlitos Miguel, que era mi hijo, me iba a fallar.
I knew that there was no way that my son Carlitos would fail me when we'd had so many adventures together and been so close.
A famous painter at home in Uruguay, Carlos has crossed the continent to find his son.
Hello, Commander Massa.
Carlos Páez, desde el primer momento.
From the beginning, Carlos Páez had the drive, courage, and determination to find his son.
Massa takes the unusual step of allowing Carlos to take part in the search flights.
Y había que estar horas circulando arriba de las montañas a ver si encontrábamos algo.
We spent hours circling the mountains. I prayed for my son with tears in my eyes, not knowing if it was from the pain of the search or the reflection of the snow.
La fuerza de la nieve.
After 3 days on the mountain, the survivors grow weak from hunger. They ration 8 chocolate bars, some candy and dried fruit, a packet of salted crackers, and 3 small jars of jam amongst 28 passengers. Carlitos and the others are sure they've been spotted. They're wrong.
Los problemas que encuentran las personas.
The problem that many search parties encounter when searching from a plane is that it's difficult to distinguish objects from the glare of the surrounding snow. In this case, the plane was buried in the snow, so we were never going to see it.
Nando Parado has been unconscious with a broken skull since the crash. But on the 3rd day, he wakes up.
Where's my mom?
On board the doomed flight was Nando's mother and younger sister, Susie. Nando's teammate, 19-year-old Roberto Canessa, breaks the news.
Nando, I'm so sorry.
Roberto tells Nando that his mother died in the crash and that her body is buried outside with the others. He implores Nando to stay calm so that he may help his sister Susie, who is alive but badly injured.
Susie! Susie! Susie!
Susie era mi hermana menor.
Susie was my younger sister. We always got along very well. When I realized that my sister was in the front section of the fuselage, she became my priority.
Nando's sister is gravely ill from internal injuries.
Lo único que yo podía hacer para
The only thing I could do for her was to keep her warm by hugging her.
era darle calor, estar abrazado con.
The boys scavenge through the wreckage of the plane, searching for anything that may help keep them alive. Desperation forces them to be inventive. The survivors use seats, debris, and suitcases to build a protective wall against the savage cold. Their collective body temperatures create just enough warmth to avoid freezing. Although surrounded by snow, Nando and the others suffer from dehydration.
La sed.
The thirst at that altitude is exactly the same as the one you can feel in the middle of the desert, in the Sahara. You dehydrate a lot faster than at sea level.
Dehydration happens when a person's breathing rate increases. To get sufficient oxygen from the thin atmosphere, Nando must breathe more quickly, which expends more moisture than normal. What Nando and the others don't realize is that eating snow also robs the body of valuable energy and heat and accelerates the process of hypothermia. Ingesting snow rapidly cools the mouth, and when it's swallowed, the cold water lowers the body's temperature. To restore warmth to the mouth and body, valuable heat and energy is expended.
Sin una protección de labios.
With no protection from the cold and wind, your lips start to break and bleed. And if you put snow in your mouth, it hurts a lot. It was a double torture, the thirst plus the pain of putting snow on your destroyed lips.
El hecho de ponerse hielo y nieve en los labios totalmente destruidos.
But there was no other way.
No había otra forma.
Carlitos tries to melt snow by shaking it, but it burns valuable energy and proves exhausting.
The solution came about when someone discovered a way to make water, drop by drop.
The survivors discover that every seat back contains an aluminum sheet. They fold the metal sheets to create a makeshift funnel.
Una hoja de aluminio.
You put a thin layer of snow on the aluminum sheet, and the sun melted that layer into a tin can. And once that can was filled, we'd all take turns taking a sip of water.
Despite severe rationing, they are running out of food. Starvation is making everyone weak.
Carlito,
Nando quietly confides in his friend Carlitos.
you awake? Yeah. I'm gonna climb up.
Nando is becoming obsessed with the idea of walking out of the mountains to freedom. Carlitos doesn't take it seriously. He insists Nando is too weak from hunger to even think about it.
We have to eat something or we're gonna die. Carlito.
Hunger forces the survivors to think about cannibalism. Now some even dare to mention it out loud. But the idea is still so alien, so forbidden. that nobody is yet prepared to act upon it.
God help us all. I've been thinking the same thing.
No, it doesn't matter. We need to get the battery out of
5 days and still no sign of rescue. Using snowshoes made of strapping and seat cushions, Roberto, Carlitos, and 2 other survivors plan a trek up the mountain in search of the plane's missing tail.
Nuestra obsesión era encontrar la cola del avión, porque en la cola del avión
We were
estaba
obsessed with finding the airplane's tail because that's where all the luggage was, and also the batteries to power the plane's radio.
que nos daban la posibilidad de juntarlo al radiotransmisor.
If they find the tail, the boys hope to bring back the plane's battery so they can power up the cockpit radio and send out a distress call. Meanwhile, Nando studies a map from the cockpit, trying to find his escape route out of the mountains. He thinks he's figured out where they've crashed, not too far from the Chilean foothills. Nando believes that only one mountain stands between him and safety.
We thought we were very close to Chile. Chile was to the west, and if we climbed that mountain, we would be saved.
After trekking for hours, Carlitos and the boys return to the safety of the fuselage. They were unable to find the tail section of the plane.
Todo era en contra nuestra.
Everything was against us. We were walking in snow waist deep, struggling because of the lack of oxygen and because we were so weak, and the cold, unimaginable. Human beings cannot imagine how unbearable it was.
The boys are frozen, exhausted, and defeated. For Nando Parado, day 8 is devastating. After a painful struggle, his sister Susie has died.
Lo único que me consuela o que estoy...
The only thing that comforted me was that she died peacefully in my arms, and she wasn't alone. After my sister died, I felt a change, a very important change. There was an inner voice that was instinct or heart or will, I don't know how to describe it, that told me I have to go on. You have to move forward. You cannot cry. You can't destroy yourself morally or emotionally. You have to fight to survive.
Sino que tienes que luchar para sobrevivir.
Finally, the food runs out.
Lo último que yo comí fue...
The last thing I ate was a peanut covered in chocolate. I made it last for 3 days.
The survivors are slowly starving to death. Since the crash, Nando's body tapped into the limited energy reserves stored in his liver. To keep him alive, his body begins to feed off itself by breaking down fat deposits and muscle tissue into protein and energy. As his fat and muscle tissues are depleted, his body will become increasingly weak. Vital organs such as kidneys, lungs, and heart will eventually fail. Unless Nando can find a new source of protein and energy, he and the rest of the survivors will die.
Nosotros probamos todo lo que podíamos comer.
We tried everything that we could possibly eat. Pieces of leather, pieces of shoes, pieces of wood, even hair gel, but there was nothing.
As survivors continue to starve, Roberto Canessa, a medical student and respected leader, broaches the taboo subject. Roberto's message is blunt and urgent. Starvation is killing them all. Their only hope is protein, and there's only one way to get it.
And the only protein here is in the bodies of our friends. If you want to see your families again, then this is what we must
For some of the survivors, the idea is too repulsive to consider. Others resist the idea on moral grounds. Nando argues that the victims' souls have left their bodies. He reasons that consuming their remains in order to survive will mean they haven't died in vain.
Roberto Canessa was very important because he was a medical student and he said, if we want to survive, we have to do it. And you have to be in that place, at that moment, in that position, with that fear, that feeling of abandonment, to understand that decision.
At first, not all the survivors will eat human flesh, but eventually, everyone will. The flesh they eat provides enough protein to keep them alive. The survivors find a transistor radio and jury-rig the antenna. They try to find news of the rescue efforts. They are stunned to hear that they've been given up for dead. The search has been called off.
The moment I heard they called off the search, I knew we were going to die there. With no food, no water, no rescue, we were trapped. And I told myself, rather than dying slowly here, I would prefer to die fighting.
Nando is convinced that he must climb the mountain to find help.
Yo sabía que yo me iba a ir, pero tenía miedo de ir solo.
I knew I was going to leave, but I was afraid of going alone. Without realizing it, I began to analyze the boys. I was thinking, with this one I can go, with this one I cannot. Yes, no. Slowly, the list got smaller.
For Nando, there is only one choice for a climbing partner, Roberto.
I got along with Roberto very well. He was a leader. He worked hard, and he had courage. I asked him to come with me.
Y yo le pedía que por favor me acompañara.
The official search has been called off, but Carlos Paez refuses to give up his personal quest to find his son Carlitos. He travels from village to village, asking anyone he meets if they have seen signs of a plane crash.
Señor. Ah, ¿cuántos kilómetros son? Ya. 1,5 kilómetros, me dijo.
Claro, hay una baja grande que hay ahí y toma para la derecha. Cuando guste, señor.
Muchas gracias.
His search makes him a legend in the region.
Hasta el punto que se corrió un poco.
And that's when we started hearing, there goes that crazy old man who's still looking for his son that's lost in the mountains.
On their 17th night in the fuselage, the survivors hear a terrifying new sound. An avalanche has started down the mountain. It's gathering speed and heading toward the fuselage. The avalanche buries most of the 27 survivors, including Nando Parrado.
I felt like I had 1,000 tons of concrete on my chest. I couldn't breathe anymore.
Eight people die in the avalanche, including 25-year-old Marcelo Perez, the team's captain and leader. For the 19 remaining survivors, morale is at an all-time low.
The avalanche was an important part of the story, more than you can think. The mountain was definitely trying to kill us one by one, and this increased my desire to leave as quickly as possible.
6 weeks trapped in the Andes. By day 43, only 17 survivors remain. But there is a small glimmer of hope. A few days ago, some of the boys finally found the plane's tail section, and in it the battery for the radio. Today, Nando, Roberto, and 2 others return to the tail with the radio and its transmitter. They hope to fix the radio and send out a distress call. Wiring the radio, transmitter, and battery together is extremely complicated. It will take days to determine the correct connections. Meanwhile, in their continual search for warmth, Nando and his friend Antonio discover a valuable commodity: pieces of insulation.
We didn't have the knowledge, the capacity, the gear. We didn't know how to make it work. We just had hope.
Roberto has been counting on the radio to save them.
It was going to be a miracle if it worked. I sincerely think that in the end, nobody expected that radio to work.
Their attempt to make contact with the outside world has failed. Nando and Roberto know that death is inevitable unless they attempt the impossible: scale the mountain that stands between them and safety.
Go down farther. Go down farther.
boys build a giant cross next to the tail section as a sign to any rescue planes. It's November 28th. They have been trapped on the mountain for 47 days. Nando plans his escape.
I had chosen December 12th to leave, because if you do not choose a date, you stay and stay. I told Roberto we have to leave, because if we wait too long, we will become too weak to escape from here. The preparation for the final expedition was a lot of teamwork, spectacular teamwork. Everyone gave it their best shot so we could be successful.
Nando and Roberto expect the trek to go on for days. The greatest danger is freezing overnight on the mountain. The insulation found in the tail could save their lives.
Carlitos was in charge of sewing a sleeping bag with copper thread that we got from electrical material from the airplane.
They used the glare shield from the cockpit to make sunglasses for Nando and Roberto to protect them from snow blindness. To carry the supply of human flesh and water they will need, clothes are converted into knapsacks.
Some gave their best clothes so that we could fight the cold. Everybody knew that this was the last chapter in our story. The expedition would prevail, or it was death for all of us.
In village after village, Carlos posts a cash reward for any news about a crash site and the whereabouts of his son Carlitos.
Estoy tratando de encontrar información sobre el avión que se perdió. ¿Se los pasan a su papá?
Yo siento que me transformé en un cartero.
I felt like a postman, bringing news from place to place. I knew that the more people that were worried about the lost plane, the sooner we would find it.
Before leaving the fuselage for the last time, Nando offers the remains of his mother and Susie as food for survival.
Not only did Nando have the courage to climb the biggest mountain in the world, he had the courage and nobility to authorize us to feed from the most sacred thing he had, his mother and sister.
I thought to myself that Carlitos doesn't know how scared I am, or that I don't know where I'm going. I don't have the slightest idea, and I said, look, this could be very difficult, and we may not return.
On December 12th, as planned, Nando and Roberto begin their climb. They are joined by 19-year-old Antonio Vicentin. From the outset, the climb to almost 5,000 meters is physically devastating.
What I remember most while we were climbing was my breath, how I had to breathe before I moved another step.
Nando and the others are feeling the effects of high altitude. The air is much thinner. Every breath that Nando takes has much less oxygen than at sea level. This reduces blood flow to the heart and muscles. Eventually, the restricted blood flow can cause brain fluids to leak inside the skull. The brain begins to swell. If left untreated, the results can be fatal. Symptoms include fatigue, headaches, nausea, vomiting, and loss of muscle control and coordination.
nos lleva a cerrar toda nuestra mente a todo lo
You close your mind to everything that is not of that moment. I was totally concentrating on the next step, where I was going to put my feet, my hand. My whole life was planning the next 10 or 15 meters, and then the next 10.
Los siguientes 10 metros, 15 metros, 20 metros, era constante pero en espacios cortos.
It was a constant flow of short intervals. If I had thought about what was ahead, I never would have made it. And I think that the constant flow hid the physical pain.
It's been weeks since the official Chilean rescue mission was called off. But the victims' families put pressure on the government in Uruguay to send up a special surveillance plane. High over the mountains, the plane's camera records an unmistakably human sign. A cross. The photos are developed at the Chilean Air Force Base. Jorge Massa and Carlos Paez examine the photos.
Look, this is a cross. This is a cross in the snow.
It's true. We've never seen a cross there before.
This is a sign that the boys are alive.
I hope you're right.
I am right.
But the next day, Commander Massa receives some new and disappointing information about the origin of the cross.
De informaciones que recibimos de Argentina.
After speaking to officials in Argentina, we discovered that, unfortunately, the cross was actually made of instruments used to measure snow levels that would tell us how much water to expect in the summer.
The cross in the photos is not the one the boys have built. Once again, the rescue mission is called off.
Pensamos que íbamos a subir la montaña en un día y íbamos a estar arriba.
We thought we were going to climb the mountain in one day, and then see the valleys of Chile, or the lights of a city. But it wasn't what we thought. It was much bigger and much more difficult.
Over this. We'll see the foothills.
For 2 months, Nando and Roberto have believed that if they can only get over the mountain, they will descend into the green valleys of the Chilean foothills.
Me di cuenta al subir esa montaña, al estar en ese...
After climbing that mountain, I realized that everything we thought was wrong. We weren't in the foothills. We were in the middle of a mountain chain. There was no chance of surviving. Absolutely no chance.
The boys believe the crash site is in Chile, on the western edge of the mountain chain. In fact, they are trapped in the middle of the Andes, east of Chile and in Argentina.
Para mí ese fue uno de los...
It was the most decisive moment of my life. I accepted that I was going to die in those mountains. I was not going to return to that plane. But dying up here seemed useless.
After 3 days of difficult climbing, they are demoralized, broken, and exhausted. But Nando and Roberto resolve to forge on. They have already sent Antonio back to the fuselage. This allows them to add his third of the food rations to their own. Now they must make their way down the mountain into the icy valley. Carlos Paez has not given up the search, though his son Carlitos has been missing for more than 60 days. Carlos rents his own plane to scour the mountains.
There were so many days, and so many nights, and so many tears when I was looking for them. I was putting pressure on myself to be the one who found the plane. With Christmas arriving, it was dramatic, because I had to return to Uruguay without Carlitos.
Nando and Roberto have been walking for days. Their muscles cramp painfully from overexertion.
As the days went by, we started to feel weaker, mentally and physically. I wondered what would happen if Roberto broke his leg, or if he couldn't walk anymore. Do I carry him, or do I leave him here? These are doubts that a person has, because we're human. The mountains are beautiful. They're majestic. They rule in that place. They don't want humans there. When one is dying in those mountains, they transform into a truly horrible monster.
Seven days into their long trek, Nando and Roberto are barely able to continue.
Creo que se autohipnotiza para no saber.
I think I was hypnotized. You don't realize how hard what you're doing is. If I had stopped to think, I would have died. We were approaching our limit, a physical limit. It was a real low. There wasn't much life left in us.
It's been 9 days since Nando and Roberto left the crash site.
We had been living in a black and white world because of the snow and rocks. For me, going from snow to rocks was like crossing a line, a very important line, the line from death to life. We had hope.
A few hours later, the first real proof that they have returned to the land of the living.
The first moment I realized that I might survive was when the man stopped his horse to look at us. And I said, "This is the first contact with civilization. He will save us."
The man across the river signals that he will go for help. The next day, a group of horsemen carry Nando and Roberto to a local village. They savor the first real food they've eaten in 70 days. Word spreads of 2 plane crash survivors who have walked away from death. The story grows even more incredible when the boys reveal that 14 other survivors are waiting to be rescued back at the crash site. The Chilean Air Rescue Service dispatches helicopters to rescue the remaining survivors. On December 22nd, a Christmas surprise for those who survived 72 days in the Andes.
Susie!
Carlos Paez has been told that his son Carlitos is among the survivors. But after his epic 10-week search, he hardly dares believe it.
La angustia de la espera del helicóptero fue tremenda.
There was a lot of anguish while waiting for the helicopter. When it landed and the dust settled, I saw Carlitos. He smelled of sweat and sacrifice and death. I hugged him intensely. I think that photo of us shows that moment very well, because it conveys the horror and the happiness at the same time.
It's a reunion that probably never would have happened if it wasn't for the determination of Nando to find an escape route out of the Andes. As Carlitos exits the helicopter, he embraces Nando.
I wanted to thank Nando in some way for what he had done. I hugged him. We fell to the ground. For the first time, I felt warm.
Only 16 of the 45 survived, huddled in a battered fuselage, weak with hunger and numb with cold for 72 days. It is a testament to the strength of the human will, one of the greatest survival stories of the 20th century. Carlitos Paez lives in Uruguay near his father.
At 53 years of age, I am lucky to still have my father alive and active. To be able to share a sunset, the same sunset we have always shared. To be able to share these moments and continue to share this story that will forever be a part of our lives.
It's true that nothing is impossible if you fight with passion. I believe that the intent is more important than the outcome. But in order to succeed, you must try.
Nando is a successful businessman living in Montevideo with his wife and children.
Yo creo que siempre me gustó estar vivo. Tal vez esta experiencia me dio la...
Maybe this experience has allowed me to enjoy things I never enjoyed before. I enjoy the present. The past is past. The future is not here yet. And so I enjoy the present very much because I sincerely believe that I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. People often live in the future, think of the future. I think of today. Today is the most important day of my life.